said. I was losing my mind. I smiled, then showed the judge my bank records, security footage, and legal authority over the $14.00 trust. Suddenly, no one laughed anymore. I baked the cake myself. Lemon pound, extra glaze, just how Paul used to love it. I even wrapped it in that old tin he painted in second grade, the one with the chipped stars and crooked flag. I had to walk 3 blocks from the bus stop because the rideshare canceled on me, but I figured it would be worth it. My son was being promoted, and the invitation said family welcome. I remember standing at the gate, the wind tugging at my scarf, staring at that big white rental tent in the yard. Music was playing, something loud and modern I did not recognize, and people were milling about in suits and cocktail dresses, laughing with drinks in their hands. I pressed the intercom and waited. A young man I had never seen before answered. "Name?" "I'm his mother," I said, holding the cake up with a smile. He looked over his shoulder, spoke into a headset, then turned back to me. "Sorry, ma'am, you're not on the guest list." "I'm family," I repeated gently. "Paul is my son." He blinked. "I was told not to let in any surprises. Please wait." He left me standing at the gate for 7 minutes. I know, because I watched the second hand on my watch tick. The same watch Paul gave me for my 60th birthday. When the gate finally buzzed open, I stepped in with careful dignity. My knees do not like the cold anymore. The tent was filled with people I did not recognize. I saw Paul near the front, tall, proud, gesturing to a slideshow about his vision for real estate development in Georgia. I waited by the back, holding the cake like it was a baby. I did not want to interrupt. Then Gwyneth spotted me. She was wearing a red-sheath dress that cost more than my pension. Her face curled when she saw me. "What are you doing here?" she hissed, marching over with her wine glass half full. "Who let you in?" I opened my mouth, but she cut me off. "Do not say you're invited. You weren't. Paul and I agreed this is a professional celebration, not a pity party." I looked around. "But the invitation, that was sent to your old address by mistake." She rolled her eyes. "Jesus, are you still living there? I told Paul to cut that place loose months ago." I tried to hand her the cake. "I brought this." Gwyneth did not take it. She stepped back like it was poison. "Is that even refrigerated? Did you seriously bake something from your old kitchen and drag it across town like this is some potluck in 1984? "It's lemon pound," I said softly. "Paul used to love—" "Paul does not eat sugar anymore," she snapped. "Vince is on a cleanse. And he does not need this drama. You showing up uninvited with some homemade relic just proves what we have been saying." I felt the weight in my hands shift. Not just the cake. Everything. Then Paul noticed me. He paused mid-speech, his jaw tensed. "Mom?" I smiled. "Hi, darling, Can we talk outside?" he said quickly. "Now." He led me out of the tent, Gwyneth right behind us like a shadow. We were in the driveway when he turned to me. "Mom, you cannot do this." "Do what, Paul? I came to celebrate." "You came to cause a scene," he snapped. "We talked about this. Your memory's been slipping. You repeat the same story about 1998 over and over like it's new." "I remember plenty," I said. "I remember when you were 10, and I took 2 jobs to pay for your school trip. I remember the time I held your hand when you got stitches on your chin." He sighed, rubbing his temple. "This isn't about the past. You need help, Mom, real help, professional help." "Because I brought a cake?" "Because you keep showing up. To the office, to Gwyneth's meetings, telling people stories. You said the nurse stole your ring." "There's no nurse, Mom. No one's stealing anything. You're paranoid. You're unwell." Gwyneth folded her arms. "You need supervision. You're not safe alone. You left the stove on last week. You called Paul. Richard. Who's Richard even?" "My brother," I whispered. "He died in 1949. "Exactly," she said, like she won the argument. "See?" Paul softened just enough to sound like a salesman. "We're looking at care homes. Good ones, with memory care. Clean, respectful. You'll have a suite, staff, no more stress." I stared at him. "So this is why you wanted me to sign those papers last week?" He blinked. "It's for your benefit." "No, Paul, it's for yours." There was a silence that said too much, And if you've ever walked into a room built for family and felt like a trespasser in your own bloodline, go ahead and hit that hype button. Let's keep stories like mine from slipping between the cracks, silent and unseen, because silence is where the truth often waits. Back then, I just nodded. I turned to leave. The cake in my hands felt twice as heavy. As I stepped off the porch, the tin slipped. It hit the concrete, the lid popped, the cake slid out, breaking clean in half. Gwyneth laughed. "Oh my God," she gasped. "At least we didn't let her carry the champagne." I bent down, picked up what I could. My fingers were shaking. A piece of glaze stuck to my coat. The same coat Paul gave me when he graduated college. A few people had come outside now, watching. Not helping, just watching. I stood up slowly, wiped my hands, and I smiled. I walked down that driveway without looking back. The rain started 5 minutes later. Cold, misty, and not quite enough to soak through, but enough to feel like it knew what had just happened. Back home, I wrapped the broken cake in foil and placed it in the fridge. I sat at the table and opened the drawer where I kept my files. I took out the folder marked Fidelity Trust, Meliora Estate. I did not cry, not yet, because I knew something they had forgotten. I was not crazy, and I never forget where the money is. People always assume that silence means regret, that if you do not explain yourself, it is because you are ashamed. But I have never been ashamed of what I did for my family. I only regret that I raised a son who thinks strength looks like shouting and legacy smells like cologne. Before I was anyone's mother, I was Meliora Dunn, senior accountant for the largest independent bank in Atlanta. Back when calculators had cranks and numbers were penciled in ledgers. I ran circles around men who thought my lipstick made me soft. I had 3 promotions before I turned 35. I was the one they sent to clean up after mergers. Never the face on the billboard, but the one in the locked room solving million-dollar problems in silence. Then Franklin got sick. It started with a limp, then dizziness, slurred words. The doctors said it was Parkinson's, fast-moving. That meant I had 5, maybe 6 years with the man who held my hand through my father's funeral and brought me soup when I had the flu every winter. I didn't hesitate. I gave my notice. My manager cried. He offered me a sabbatical. He said, "You'll regret giving up your prime." But I never did. I went home, rolled up my sleeves, and became a full-time caregiver. I used every trick I knew from accounting to make our savings stretch. I cooked, cleaned, fed him, bathed him, managed his medications. When he could no longer speak, I read him the newspaper aloud. I learned to decipher his expressions like language. I memorized the way his eyelids twitched when he was in pain. And every night, I still did the math on our investments, alone, at the kitchen table, while Paul slept. Paul was 15 when Franklin's hands first shook. 17 when he realized his friends would not come over anymore. And 18 when he got the scholarship. Georgia Tech, full ride, engineering. The day the letter came, Franklin had just been hospitalized with a breathing episode. I held the envelope in my hands and smiled at Paul like nothing was wrong. But I knew. The group he ran with had already been in trouble. Vandalism, street racing, a little weed. I had called one of the boys' mothers to warn her. She told me to mind my own business. I did the only thing I thought would save him. I told Paul he could not go. "You're joking," he said. "You're ruining my life." "We need you here," I told him. "Your father needs you. I cannot do this alone." "You mean you won't?" he snapped. He never forgave me. He stayed. But in his eyes, I was no longer his mother. I was the prison warden of his youth. What he never knew was that I had already filed for state care assistance, that 2 weeks later, a rotating nurse schedule began, that by the time Franklin passed, I had already lined up a job interview to return to work. I just wanted him safe. I wanted Paul to live. But Paul only saw the door I closed, not the car crash I kept him from. 2 of those boys, one died in a motorcycle accident. The other is still in and out of jail for assault. But Paul never made the connection. To him, I was the selfish woman who stole his shot. So I let him believe it, because by the time Franklin passed, I had a new plan. I used my old contacts, reopened our investment account, and quietly began building what Franklin once called my whisper empire. See, the thing about trusts is they are like soil. You plant things deep, wait patiently, and never boast about the roots. I structured the estate as an irrevocable living trust, every dividend reinvested, every property bought under anonymous LLCs. I used shell companies, tax shelters, and strategies I learned long before Gwyneth ever Googled how to marry rich. No one ever asked how I paid for my house, or why I never applied for Social Security early. I kept the books to myself, lived modestly, and told Paul, "We're just getting by." He believed me. People always do when you wear old shoes. But the truth is, the Meliora Estate Trust grew from one modest $401k rollover into a $14,200,000 0-cents portfolio, diversified, balanced, and immune to their greed, because I never put their names on it, not once, not even Paul's. He had a chance. On his 30th birthday, I offered him a business grant, $150,000 0-cents. He said no, said he did not want Mommy's guilt money, said I owed him more than cash. He wanted his youth back, as if I had stolen it like a thief in the night. So I waited. I funded scholarships for kids he would never meet. I paid hospital bills for neighbors who never knew my name. I bought 3 rental properties and put them under the trust, knowing one day I might need more than a home, I might need leverage. And I kept every receipt, every signature, every video clip, every document. The day Gwyneth first mentioned memory care, I knew what they were planning. They thought if they whispered it long enough, I would believe it myself. But I remember every damn digit I ever typed, every betrayal I ever forgave too soon, every smirk on Gwyneth's face when she called me eccentric, every time Paul looked at me like I was just a relic of his childhood. I even remember the moment I knew Paul was lost. He came over one evening. Gwyneth had just had their second baby. I brought a hand-knitted blanket and a small check, just enough for a stroller. Paul took the blanket, tossed it on a chair and said, "We'll probably buy something more modern." He never cashed the check. That was the night I updated the trust. Removed his name from my medical proxy. I replaced it with my attorney. Added a clause for abuse, financial manipulation, and forced guardianship. If anyone tried to commit me without medical necessity, the trust would trigger automatic review and legal defense, funded from its own capital. I protected myself because no one else would, and still, I stayed silent. Let them call me forgetful. Let them joke about my episodes. Let them assume I was harmless. Because I knew. When the time came, silence would not be weakness, it would be strategy. There is a kind of betrayal that does not arrive with shouting or slammed doors. It comes quietly, like mold under wallpaper, slow, creeping, and already rotting everything before you even notice the smell. It started with the way Gwyneth looked at me, not with suspicion or resentment, those came later, but with the kind of glance reserved for dust on a chandelier, something you tolerate for a while before hiring someone to deal with it. She moved into my home like she was visiting a hotel that needed renovation. She rearranged my furniture, replaced the curtains, threw out my dishes. She told Paul it was to bring freshness into the space, but freshness, in her mind, meant erasing me room by room. I let her. I even helped her replant the garden, though she yanked out my rosemary bush like it offended her. "It's too strong," she said, "and it looks like a weed." She never asked why it was planted there. That bush had grown from a clipping Franklin gave me on our 5th anniversary. I had kept it alive through every winter, every move, every heartbreak. But to Gwyneth, it was just in the way. And Paul, he watched, said nothing, just scratched his beard and shrugged. "Let her do her thing, Mom," he said. "She's trying to help." Help. That word had lost its meaning. The real shift came after Franklin's funeral. I moved back into the house alone, quiet, surrounded by memories. Paul insisted they come stay for a while to help with paperwork. I was grateful at first, thought maybe grief had softened him, but then, one night, I passed by the kitchen and heard them talking. "I swear she's losing it," Gwyneth whispered. "She called me Franklin yesterday, dead serious. She's mixing up names, wandering into rooms like she forgot why she walked in." "She does that a lot," Paul said. "She asked me how the twins were. We only have one kid." Gwyneth laughed. "She's a ticking time bomb, and I'm not changing diapers for the second generation." Silence. Then Paul said something I will never forget. "If we get her declared incompetent, everything shifts. We can manage the estate, the house, the trust, what's left of it. What about legal guardianship? Gwyneth asked. There are ways. I know a guy, quiet, efficient. I remember stepping back from the doorway, holding onto the wall, my heart thudding like a drum. Not because I was surprised, but because some part of me had been waiting for this moment for years. That was the first night I locked my bedroom door. After that, the pressure began in earnest. Gwyneth started correcting me in front of the baby. No, Meliora, it's not nap time yet. You're confusing things again. Paul began leaving articles on dementia around the house. Printouts, pamphlets, highlighted sentences. One morning, I found a calendar by the fridge with notes scribbled. Mom forgot appointment. Mom left water running. Mom repeated story. I had done none of those things, but I understood what they were building. A paper trail of madness. And when I confronted Paul, he said the one thing that finally cracked the dam. You are the reason my life went to hell, he hissed. You kept me from college, from my future, and now you hang around my neck like a bad debt. I looked at my son, the same boy who once sobbed in my arms over a skinned knee, and saw nothing left of him in his eyes. You brought me back home, he said, tied me to Dad's sickbed, made me watch him die. Now you want to cling to me like I owe you something? I saved you, I said. Saved me? He laughed bitterly. From what? A real life? A real career? You stole my future and now you want sympathy because you're old and lonely? I said nothing. What was there to say? He leaned in closer, venom in his voice. You want to be needed. You need to be the murder. But here's the truth, Mom. You are not some noble widow. You're just a woman who wasted her own life and wants to drag everyone else down with her. That night, I packed my important papers into a fireproof box. I added new locks to my desk. I called my lawyer and updated my healthcare proxy. The next morning, Gwyneth made French press coffee and told Paul, loud enough for me to hear, I Googled guardianship laws in Georgia. If we act before she does something drastic, we can petition the court ourselves. Paul replied, we just need a doctor to sign off. I can talk to that neurologist from the fundraiser. He owes me. They did not even lower their voices anymore. Later that week, I walked into the kitchen to find Gwyneth on the phone. She's still here, she said. Barely. I mean, she forgets the dog's name. She wears the same cardigan 3 days in a row. She's fading. Paul and I are looking into placements. Then, spotting me in the doorway, she said with a tight smile, Morning. Would you like some tea? I nodded. Sat down. Waited. She poured the tea, then added, You know, Meliora, there are some lovely communities these days. Not like the old homes. They have theaters, salons, even wine nights. I see, I said, sipping. She reached across the table, placing her manicured hand over mine. We just want what's best for you, and honestly, you deserve peace. I looked at her hand, then her face. You want me dead, I said calmly. She froze. Not exactly, she said, withdrawing her hand. We just want you secure. That night, I installed a motion camera in my room. I moved the trust documents to a safety deposit box. I gave power of attorney to my lawyer and cut Paul out of all financial permissions. And I waited. Waited for them to make the first official move. Because once they did, I could respond. Legally. Precisely. Without emotion, I was not crazy. But I was done pretending not to see. They thought they were building a case. What they did not realize was that I had already written the final chapter, and I had signed it in ink they would never understand. I should have known better than to bring that cake again. But I thought maybe, just maybe, Paul would remember. Lemon pound, extra glaze, the kind I made every birthday until he left home. I had even found the old blue tin, the one he painted in Sunday school, chipped and rusty around the edges. I scrubbed it gently with a toothbrush and wrapped it with gold ribbon. I told myself it was tradition. That family had long memories. I was wrong. The party was in full swing when I arrived. The tent was bigger this time, spanning the entire backyard. The lighting was elegant, draped like stars overhead, and a string quartet played jazz versions of pop songs I did not recognize. It was Paul's Investor Gala, the culmination of his latest project. A luxury condo tower in Buckhead. They called it Legacy Heights. an irony not lost on me. A valet took my coat and looked at the tin in my hands with confusion. Deliveries go around back. I'm not a delivery person, I said softly. I'm his mother, he apologized. I smiled. The smile I had learned to use when I wanted to disappear gracefully. I stepped inside the tent, and the air changed. Dozens of people in tailored suits and sequined dresses stood sipping champagne from coupes and nodding at renderings of skyscrapers on easels. On the main stage, a spotlight lit up the project's logo, flanked by gold-framed posters reading, "Vision, Value, Victory." Paul stood at the front, microphone in hand, shaking hands with city councilmen and developers. He did not see me right away, but Gwyneth did. She was near the drink table, dressed in something red and shimmering, laughing with a man who looked like he had never paid for his own haircut. Her eyes found me, and her entire face fell. Then she smiled, a tight, glossy thing with no warmth behind it, and began her walk across the tent like a model in a courtroom. "Oh," she said, her voice just loud enough to draw attention. "Lovely. You came." "I brought something for Paul," I said. "He always liked—" Before I could finish, she gestured at the tin. "Is that a cake?" "Yes." "A lemon pound." She turned slightly, making sure others nearby could hear. "From your kitchen?" I nodded. She laughed. "Paul is on keto." A few people glanced over. I felt the weight of their eyes. "I just thought—" "Well," she said, tilting her head, "that was a thought." I stood there, clutching the tin, willing myself to breathe slowly. In through the nose, out through the— Then she reached for the cake. "I'll just take this back to the staff. Maybe someone in catering can—" But her fingers caught the ribbon wrong. The tin slipped. It hit the floor with a metallic clang. The lid popped. The cake, soft, golden, glazed to shine, tumbled out onto the carpet. Someone gasped. Gwyneth stepped back. "Oh my God," she said, laughter bursting from her throat. "Well, that's unfortunate." I knelt down slowly. My knees screamed in protest, but I gathered what I could. Part of the cake had broken cleanly in half. Some of the glaze had landed on the hem of her dress. She looked at it like I had spilled bleach. "This," she announced, her voice now theatrical, "is why we don't bring sentimental desserts to formal events." A couple guests chuckled uncomfortably. I stood, the broken tin in my hands, my coat back at the door. My heart is somewhere beneath my shoes. Then Paul walked up. He had heard the commotion, seen the crowd forming. His eyes scanned the floor, the cake, me. "Mom," he said, his voice low but sharp. "What are you doing?" "I came to celebrate with you," I said. "You were not on the list." "I did not think I needed to be." He sighed, then turned to Gwyneth. "Can someone get this cleaned up?" Gwyneth gestured to a waiter, who rushed forward with napkins and a dustpan. Paul turned back to me. "You need to stop this." "Stop what?" "Showing up, making scenes, acting like things are normal." "I just brought a cake." "No, Mom, you brought an incident. You do not belong here anymore." The words hit harder than I expected. I stared at him. "You're my son." He nodded, as if agreeing to a transaction. "Yes, which is why I've already arranged care for you. There's a facility in Marietta, full-time, memory finkered. You'll have a room, staff, meals, structure." I blinked. "You're sending me to a home?" "It's not a home," Gwyneth interjected. "It's a center, with programs, supervision, doors that lock." I looked back at Paul. "You think I'm crazy?" "I think you're a liability," he said plainly. "And you need help." My mouth went dry. "You've already signed the papers, haven't you?" He nodded. "There's a room ready for you on Monday." The tent had gone quiet. No one moved. No one interrupted. I stepped back. One foot, then another. My heel caught on the edge of the carpet and I stumbled. No one caught me, and as I steadied myself, Gwyneth gave me that same cold, gleaming smile and said, "You should thank us. Not everyone's parents get this kind of golden exit." A few feet away, someone raised their phone. I saw the flash. I straightened, took a breath, smiled, then turned, walked to the coat check, retrieved my things, and left, through the front, my cake tin still in my hand. The wind hit me like the truth. It was done. And now, so was I. It did not take long after the party for the paperwork to arrive. A thick envelope. No return address, just my name, printed in a bold, clinical font. Inside, a court petition for involuntary guardianship. Attached, an affidavit from a licensed psychiatrist, Dr. Aaron Feldman, claiming that I was exhibiting symptoms consistent with early-stage Alzheimer's. Repetitive behavior, it read, short-term memory lapses, paranoia, unsafe living habits. The report was dated 2 days after the gala. There was also a USB stick. On it were 5 video clips. In one, I stood in the kitchen, turning in circles, muttering, "Where is it? I had it right here." I remember that moment. I was looking for a shopping list I had tucked into my apron. I found it 5 seconds later. In another clip, I called Gwyneth Suzone. That was the name of our old neighbor. Her perfume must have reminded me. I corrected myself immediately. A third showed me knocking over a glass of juice and muttering, "I'm losing my mind." It was a joke. I laughed. But they had trimmed the laughter out. Each video was short, blurry, poorly lit, and deeply manipulated. And all of them were filmed inside my bedroom and kitchen. Without my knowledge. Without my consent. I stood at the kitchen counter, staring at the pile of papers. A tremor started in my hand, not from fear but rage. They had installed cameras in my home, while pretending to care for me, while pouring my tea, while asking if I slept well. They had recorded me, spied on me, built a false narrative to hand to a judge like a tray of poisoned cookies. I picked up the USB, snapped it in half, and dropped the pieces in the trash. Then I picked up the phone and called Eleanor. We had not spoken in 3 years, not since her husband passed. She had been my assistant once, back in my banking days, sharp, driven, discreet. I helped her get into law school when she was 29 and already raising 2 kids. Now she was a partner at one of the best elder law firms in the state. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Meliora?" she said. "Are you all right?" "No," I replied. "But I will be. I need your help, and I need you to move quietly." The next day, Eleanor came to my house with her briefcase and a fire in her eyes. She wore no makeup, no jewelry. She looked like war. We sat at my kitchen table, my real one, not the polished dining set Gwyneth had bought, and went through everything. The petition, the doctor's report, the video files I had backed up on my own before destroying the USB, the copy of the household internet network logs Eleanor pulled up from her phone, proof that hidden cameras had been streaming to a cloud account. "I can file a cease and desist," she said, "but that will tip your hand." "I want to tip it," I said, "just enough. Let them think I'm scared. Let them think I'll run. Then we dig deeper." She smiled. "I forgot how dangerous you were." 2 days later, Eleanor called me. "I have something." She had subpoenaed records under emergency discovery. What she found made my stomach turn. Paul had paid Dr. Feldman a consulting fee of $8,000, 0 cents, through a shell LLC he formed 6 months earlier. The company was registered to a mailbox in Alpharetta. It had no website, no employees, and no tax ID. Just one purpose: to create a trail of legitimacy around his concern for my well-being. Worse still, he had already begun the process of transferring my property. He had scheduled a meeting with a real estate attorney for the following week. In the email, he wrote, "Once we get the guardianship hearing out of the way, I'll have full control. Let's move fast after that. My wife's cousin wants the house." I sat in silence, holding the printed copy of that email. Then Eleanor said, "There's more." She opened her phone and played an audio recording. It was Paul's voice, muffled, a little tinny, but unmistakably him. "She's halfway gone already, just waiting on the paperwork now. Once she's in the facility, I'll sign over everything. House, trust access, medical proxy, the whole package. Gwyneth's already picking out paint colors." A pause. Then, "She thinks she's clever, but she's just old. They always slow down before the end." I do not remember what expression I had on my face. I only remember Eleanor reaching across the table and gently placing her hand on mine. "You do not have to fight alone," she said. But I smiled. "Oh, I will," I said, "because I have been alone a long time, and I have not wasted a second of it." That night, I opened the trust binder, every page in place, every clause updated. I flipped to the section I had written 5 years ago, the one titled Abuse Protocols. It included video admissibility rules, medical guardian overrides, and financial lockdown measures that would trigger if fraud or manipulation was detected. And it gave my attorney the right to freeze all disbursements until an independent psychological evaluation was completed. Paul had built his plan on the assumption that I was passive. He forgot that silence is not the same as surrender. He forgot that I was watching, and now I was done waiting. When you've lived long enough in silence, you learn to hear things no one else notices. The tone beneath the words, the spaces between the lies, the way people change when they think they've won. Paul had grown bolder, Gwyneth smugger. They moved through the house like royalty now, flipping through catalogs, making calls in the open. She even brought over her cousin twice to measure for curtains. They believed the guardianship hearing would be a formality, that Dr. Feldman's diagnosis would be the final nail, that I'd be tucked away neatly, my assets opened like a candy tin. What they did not know was that I had already pressed the trigger. It was buried deep in the trust documents, Section 7.4, subsection D. A clause I added years ago after watching a documentary about elder fraud. I called it the reverse safeguard, a trapdoor for traitors. It stated that if any beneficiary attempted to access, divert, or claim control over the trust through coercion, misrepresentation, or psychological manipulation, the trust would activate a protective hold. All disbursements would be frozen. Control would revert to a named legal entity, one I had created long ago under the name Meliora Foundation, LLC. On the morning after I heard Paul's voice say, "She's just old," I opened my laptop, logged into the secure portal, and entered the code. Not a password, a phrase. "She is not done." Within minutes, the trust's internal legal team was alerted. All linked accounts were flagged. The credit cards Paul had been using, attached to the family expense fund, were locked. The stipend he had been quietly routing to Gwyneth's business? Gone. Their automatic mortgage draft? Cancelled. Every penny back in the vault. Then I made the second move. With Eleanor's help, I filed a formal complaint with the Georgia Bureau of Investigation, specifically the Elder Abuse and Financial Crimes Unit. We attached copies of the falsified diagnosis, the payment records to Dr. Feldman's fake LLC, the audio recording of Paul's confession, the property transfer emails, and most damning of all, footage from the Ring doorbell camera. I had almost forgotten about that camera, installed by Paul himself, when I needed protection. What he did not realize was that it recorded audio. Lots of it. There was footage of Paul on the front porch, speaking on the phone late at night. "Yeah, she's still in there. Harmless as ever. Once the judge signs off, I'll get the deed switched. You know how probate works. It'll be smoother if she's in care." In another clip, Gwyneth told a delivery man, "We're moving in soon. It's just a formality at this point." But perhaps the most disgusting was the footage of Paul coaching the baby, my grandchild, to say, "Nana is silly now." He laughed afterward, proud of himself. Gwyneth did too. We sent it all. Eleanor arranged it perfectly. One package to the GBI, one to the court clerk, and one directly to the judge presiding over the guardianship case. We included a private medical evaluation from a state-certified neuropsychologist confirming I had no cognitive impairment. And then we waited. For 2 days, silence. Gwyneth walked around humming. Paul made jokes about the big move at dinner. On the third day, the first call came. From the trust manager. "Mrs. Dunn, per activation of Clause 7.4D, we have initiated the freeze. All distributions and secondary accounts have been suspended. Are you authorizing Phase 2? "Yes," I said. "Trigger full review," he hesitated. "Just confirming you are aware this may result in permanent removal of named beneficiaries." "I'm not removing them," I replied. They removed themselves. Next came the knock on the door. 2 agents from the Elder Abuse Unit. They arrived early in the morning, while Gwyneth was in yoga pants making coffee. Paul came down the stairs and tried to joke, "Hope you boys brought a warrant." They had. The agents asked to see me, privately. We spoke in the sunroom. I gave them everything. Every document, every photo, every timeline, every whispered sentence I had pretended not to hear. They nodded, took notes, recorded everything, and when they left, they handed me a small white envelope. "Temporary protective order," one of them said. "If they try to move against you again, financially, physically, legally, you call us." I nodded. My hands did not tremble. That evening, Paul tried to log into the trust portal. He couldn't. Then the credit card declined. Then the lawyer for the house deal called to cancel the meeting. He'd received notice of pending investigation and did not want to be involved. By dinner, Gwyneth was pacing the kitchen. "What the hell is happening?" she snapped. Paul looked at me. "You did this." I took a bite of my soup. "I activated the clause," I said, "the one you never read." "What clause?" he shouted. "The one that protects me from you." He laughed, but there was no sound in it. "You think you're clever? This will not stick. You're old. You're alone." I smiled. "No, Paul. You're the one who's alone. You just don't know it yet." The next day, their bank accounts were subpoenaed. The following Monday, Paul was served with notice of legal action for financial fraud and elder manipulation. And Gwyneth? She was named in the conspiracy. Her design studio accounts showed incoming transfers from my trust labeled consulting fees for projects that never existed. They stopped speaking to me after that. But I was not looking for conversation. I was building a case, brick by brick, like I'd built everything they took for granted. The courtroom was colder than I expected. Not in temperature, though the air conditioning was unforgiving, but in presence. There was no warmth in the walls, no softness in the way the pews creaked under anxious bodies, just long fluorescent lights, too white to feel human, and the constant shuffle of paper against ambition. I wore gray, not black, not mourning. Gray, the color of steel under fog, of storms held back by bone-deep patience. Paul and Gwyneth sat across from me, dressed like grief in Armani. Paul's tie was navy. Gwyneth wore pearls she never earned. They leaned close, whispering rehearsed lines with the precision of salespeople. I did not look at them. Not yet. The bailiff called the room to order, and the judge entered, an older man, stern but not cruel. His name was Judge Harmon. I had read about him, former prosecutor known for silence, not speeches, the kind who listens with a blade under his bench. "Petition for guardianship," he began. "Filed by Mr. Paul Dunn, citing cognitive decline in Ms. Meliora Dunn. We'll begin with statements." Paul rose. He played his role well. "Your Honor," he began, his voice trembling just enough, "this has been the hardest decision of my life. My mother, she was my hero, but over the past year we've seen signs, forgetting names, getting lost in the grocery store, paranoia. We just want to keep her safe." He sniffled, looked down, clenched the lectern like it held him together. "Putting her in care isn't about punishment. It's about love, about protecting her from herself." He stepped back. Gwyneth took his place. "Meliora was once sharp, brilliant, but she's not that woman anymore. She forgets to eat. She leaves the stove on. She's isolated, confused. We've tried everything, therapy, assistance, home visits. This is the last resort." She turned, locking eyes with the judge. "And honestly, I fear she's being taken advantage of. There are people in her life who may be manipulating her." I raised an eyebrow. Interesting tactic. Judge Harmon nodded slowly. "And your response, Ms. Dunn?" I stood, walked calmly to the center. My knees did not shake. "Your Honor," I said, my voice steady as a gavel, "what they've described is not a diagnosis. It's a fiction, a well-funded, well-practiced fiction, crafted by two people who thought I wouldn't notice the cameras they planted in my kitchen." There was a murmur in the gallery. "I have no intention of proving myself sane today," I continued, "because I already did, 3 weeks ago. Please refer to Exhibit A." Eleanor, seated behind me, rose and handed a folder to the clerk. Inside, the full neuropsychological report from Dr. Mei Lin, one of the state's top evaluators. It confirmed my mental acuity, memory, processing speed, and independence, all within normal range for my age. The judge flipped through the report silently. "Exhibit B," I said, a second folder. This one held the 1999 trust contract, sealed, notarized, with its original clause 7.4D highlighted in yellow. "And Exhibit C," I said, nodding to Eleanor. She pressed play on the small audio speaker set at the judge's desk. Paul's voice filled the courtroom. "She's halfway gone already, just waiting on the paperwork now. Once she's in the facility, I'll sign over everything. House, trust access, medical proxy, the whole package." A beat. "She thinks she's clever, but she's just old." Silence fell like a dropped chandelier. Paul's face drained. Gwyneth looked at the floor. I turned back to the judge. "This," I said, "is not about my mind. It's about my money. It's about a son who sees his mother not as a human being but as an obstacle." I paused. "I raised that boy. I cleaned his blood from my bathroom floor when he split his chin at 8. I fed him when his father could no longer hold a spoon, and I gave up my career so he could sleep while his father coughed through the night." I leaned slightly forward. "And this is how he repaid me." Judge Harmon said nothing for a long moment. Then he cleared his throat. "Mr. Dunn," he said, "do you have any response to these materials?" Paul stood, his voice cracked. "It was taken out of context. I was frustrated, scared. You were arranging a property transfer," the judge said, "without legal authority. I made a mistake." "Multiple," I added quietly. The judge turned to me. "Ms. Dunn, what would you like this court to do?" I looked at him squarely. "I'd like to retain all rights and responsibilities over my person and estate." He nodded. "Granted. And I'd like this petition dismissed with prejudice." "Granted." He paused. "Anything else?" I took a breath, then smiled. "I'd like to keep my silence. And everything that comes with it." Judge Harmon closed the folder and leaned back. "Well said, Ms. Dunn." Case dismissed. 6 months passed like fog clearing from a battlefield. At that time, I did not visit the courtroom again. I did not make speeches. I did not gloat. I let the paperwork do the talking. The trust remained frozen until a full financial audit cleared me of all incompetence and exposed Paul and Gwyneth's coordinated fraud. The final report listed 18 violations, including asset misappropriation, falsified medical testimony, and unlawful surveillance of a protected adult. Paul faced fines, legal fees, and public scrutiny. Gwyneth, who had still been working in luxury real estate, was quietly dismissed by her agency. The reason listed was conduct unbecoming of fiduciary trust. In other words, no one wanted a broker who tried to steal her mother-in-law's house. But the real blow came weeks later. The house they once called theirs, my house, was seized and listed for auction. The same 4-bedroom with the white shutters and the crepe myrtle trees I planted after Franklin passed. The house I had cleaned for decades. The house Paul wanted to strip from my name with a forged signature and a fake doctor's note. They tried to fight it, but their accounts were frozen, their legal standing gone, and no bank would touch them. The house went up for auction on a Thursday morning. A quiet listing, attended only by a few investors and the court representative. The winning bid came from an LLC called M&D Properties. The paperwork was pristine, the wire transfers immediately. They never saw my name, but I saw theirs. On the rental application. Because 1 month later, Paul and Gwyneth returned to the house, not as owners, but as tenants. They had tried to find another place, but no landlord in town wanted the attention that came with their scandal. And when your life has burned down in the middle of a recession, you learn to take what you can get. I did not raise the rent to punish them. I raised it because the market demanded it, and because I could. The lease was signed without protest. Gwyneth scowled when she saw the monthly amount. Paul muttered something about blood money. I said nothing. I had arranged for Eleanor to manage the property through a neutral intermediary. They still had no idea who owned it. Until 6 months later. I arrived unannounced. Not through the back, not with a cake, but through the front door, knocking gently, then waiting. Paul opened it. The blood drained from his face so fast I thought he might faint. "Mom," he said. I stepped inside without asking. The living room was smaller than I remembered, the furniture cheaper. The walls repainted in shades of apology. I handed him an envelope. "Rent is due today," I said calmly, "and there's a late fee clause in Section 12B. He opened the envelope. Inside, the rental invoice. Tripled from what they paid 6 years ago when they first moved in under my roof. "And one more thing," I added, walking toward the kitchen. I stopped by the tile, just beneath the pantry door, the spot where, once upon a time, my cake had fallen, where Gwyneth had laughed and said, "Why? That's why she doesn't belong in nice places." I tapped the floor with my cane. "You missed a spot. You should really scrub that tile better," I said. "After all, I did drop something sticky here once." Paul stood frozen. I turned to leave, but in the hallway I heard a small voice. "Grandma?" It was their daughter. My granddaughter, She was 5 now. Her eyes were big and quiet, like Paul's once were. I knelt slowly. "Yes, sweet pea?" She handed me a drawing, crayons on printer paper, a house with flowers, a woman in gray, a tiny cake. "It's you," she said. "Daddy says you're bad, but I don't think so." I took the paper, folded it gently, and kissed her head. "Thank you," I whispered. "You're a very smart girl." Then I stood and walked away. 3 days later, I finalized the scholarship. It was named the Legacy of Quiet Hands Award, given annually to women from underserved communities pursuing a degree in finance. The first recipient, a young housekeeper named Ana Morales. She had once cleaned for Gwyneth and been fired after Gwyneth said, "Only a blind girl would think this place is worth working in." Anna had been saving for night school. Now she would not have to. When I told her about the scholarship, she cried into her apron and said, "I did not think anyone saw me." "I did," I said. "I always see the quiet ones." I made no announcement, no press release, just one line in my trust ledger. Justice rendered in full, quietly, completely, forever. And that is how you win without shouting. That is how a woman keeps her silence and everything that comes with it. If you're still here, then you know now, revenge doesn't always come in fire. Sometimes it comes in silence, in paperwork, in truth, and in showing up at the front door just to collect the rent. My name is Meliora. I was the quiet one in the room, the one they thought had forgotten, the one they thought they could bury in paperwork and pity. But I remembered everything. If stories like mine mean something to you, if they remind you that wisdom doesn't shout, it remembers, then don't go just yet. Subscribe to Grandma True Stories. There are more stories to tell, and I promise you, some of them are even quieter and even sharper.